Hi, Quest Memoir class. I want to thank you so much for being willing to be flexible this Wednesday. And I'm heading off down to California for a coaching program that I'm a part of where I'll be learning more about how to build platform and grow my business and all of that material that I bring back and teach to writers when I teach platform building classes. I have one of those coming up, by the way, at Western on November 7th and 14th through the Extended Ed program. So go over and check out their website if you're interested in the question of how to build your platform as a writer. But back to Quest Memoir. I always meant for this class to be 6 class times, and for whatever reason, Whatcom made it 5 on this go round, and so there's a bit of extra material that I want to make sure that you get. And so since I'm not in town this week, I would like to go over the issue of narrator with you here, and then of course we will talk about it again when I'm back in class next week. So I like to talk about this, and excuse me while I look away here at my notes, and I will send you these notes in a PDF so you'll have them handy. I like to talk about this as the 3 U's. There are 3 of you when you're a writer, particularly when you're a memoir writer, and this is especially important for the Quest memoir. The first you is the you that's watching this video, the you who sits and drinks coffee, who types at the computer. That is the real living person who lives in the now of your life, okay? And this that's an important you because you're the one who does the work of getting the words on the paper. But in your material, there are 2 yous, arguably. The first one is the character. So you are the main character in your memoir, and the job of the main character is to drive the action of the story. The main character can't be passive. And so while in some memoirs the main character actually can be passive, you know, for example, sometimes you'll see a memoir that's really more about somebody's parents. So while I might be a character in that book, my parents are really the primary movers and shakers of the storyline. But in the Quest memoir, that's not the case, because the character, are the person driving the action. You're the one who grows. So in the case of writing the Quest memoir, you want to ask yourself, how old is your character? Now, I know for some of you, the character that you're writing about, the you that you're writing about in your material, starts pretty early on, maybe back a few years, or even as a child or in your 20s. But for some of you, the main character, the you in your work, is pretty close to your current age. So you have to determine that, like, how long is this character's story going to span? Where are you starting? How old were you when you were starting? And how does this main character grow during the course of the material? So the character could start out, for example, in a Quest memoir, like last time I taught the class, I had a woman who had gone on the PCT trail, much like Cheryl Strayed had done, and she had done that pretty early in her 20s, if I remember correctly. So now she's in her late 30s, and the course of the material, or the action in the material, only spanned about a month or 2. I think she was on the trail. So in the course of that time period, her character grew a lot. So she's going to have to start her character out as a less fully developed person, and then let that character develop over a period of about 2 months. But for some of you, your character may span several years. So just take that into consideration and make sure that when you start writing the character of you, you're writing that character, you're beginning that character at a less fully formed place than where he or she will end up. You're going to ask yourself some questions like, what does this main character learn on the quest? And in our first class, if you remember, I had you write down some of the lessons, like what did you learn through the process of what you're writing about? What life lessons did that experience give you? How does the main character change, both internally and externally? Because it could be, for example, in Wild, Cheryl Strayed's character really changes quite a bit physically. She loses weight, she gets pretty bloody, she loses a toenail. So there's some things to track with physically as well, as far as how the character changes. And then how does that main character drive the action? So in every quest memoir, the main character, the you who is the main character, is the protagonist. That doesn't necessarily have to be true in other kinds of memoir. I'm thinking about, a book I read a bazillion years ago, a celebrity memoir called Mommy Dearest by Christina Crawford, who is Joan Crawford's adopted daughter. In that tragic childhood celebrity memoir, the person who drives the story is really the crazy mother, but the character who grows is Christina, the writer, and the realizations that she comes to. In a quest memoir, the person driving the action is going to be the same person as the one who grows, because this is a quest. This is a journey that you're going on to learn something in your life. And so what tension does that carry is a question to ask yourself and to begin to write about. When the main character is feeling anxiety, how do you portray that? So there's the two yous so far. The first one is the you at the computer, the you who's watching this video. The second is the main character. And it's important to remember that that person is a construct. So that character on the page doesn't have to be the you that is at the computer. Arguably, we all have lots of different aspects to ourselves, and you're not going to be able, probably in the course of a quest memoir, be able to explicate the totality of who you are, right? Okay. So how to show this character, the character of you, to the reader. There are a few things. When I studied theater up at Western years and years ago, we talked a lot about how does the character on stage reveal him or herself. And there are a handful of things to write into the main character. What happens to the main character from the outside? How does the main character react to what happens? What do other people say about the main character? And what does the main character say back to those people? So this is where dialogue comes in. And literally, we could probably do a whole course on dialogue. So we'll talk a little bit about it when I get back. But dialogue is an interesting thing, and it's a lot of fun to write. But you obviously are not going to remember everything that was said to you at some point in your life. And that is completely fine. You will be making up dialogue. And whenever possible, dialogue moves the story along really quickly and is an important aspect of storytelling. So do not be afraid to play around with dialogue, and I'll try to, as we're looking at your work, I'll try to be coaching you where you might be able to do that. The last thing to consider in terms of developing your character is, what does your main character look like, your appearance and behavior. And funny thing about writing about ourselves, it's tough to write about what you look like. So you might have to give yourself a scene of, looking in the mirror, or in the case when maybe you're out on the trail, you're thinking, geez, I wonder what I look like. I wonder if my hair, my brown hair is going in all directions, or I wonder if my, blue eyes are averting, feel as anxious as, or look as anxious as they feel. Anyway, you've got to somehow incorporate ways to give the reader a sense of what you look like. And since there's not another character's head that you can get into, you're going to have to be creative about how you do that. Other characters can give a lot of insight into your main character. So think about who your antagonist is. So in every novel, most novels, and certainly every Shakespeare play, there's the protagonist, that's the person who moves the action, and then there is an antagonist. That's the person who buttresses up against the intention of the main character and works to prevent the main character from achieving what he or she wants. The antagonist is an important character to have in a quest memoir, something for the main character to press against. It doesn't have to be a person. It can be nature. In Wild by Cheryl Strayed, you would see the snake on the trail suddenly become an antagonist, or the thoughts in her head. It could be a memory that antagonizes. It certainly can be another person. And whenever possible, it's terrific to have other characters available to antagonize the main character in your quest memoir. Anything that antagonizes the main character, anyone or anything, gives that character a chance to grow. And therefore a chance for you, as the writer, to unpack what the takeaways are, or the universal themes that we talked about in our first class. So when you do use another character as an antagonist, or there are just other characters involved in the story, what do they do? What do they say? What do they look like? Be sure to build all of this stuff into the character building process, and do it like you're writing a novel. I mean, flesh people out. Just because they're real inside your head, the reader won't know what they look like or sound like unless you give their voice a quality, or you give them a height, or a skin color. So be sure to do that. And then also you can talk about what the narrator thinks about those characters. So all of that is a part of the process of building the main character and the main character's growth journey. Okay, so the third you, so we have the first two. We have the you that's watching the video. We have the you that is the main character, who maybe starts out, say, at 20 in your story, and will end up, once you've written the whole thing, at 21. So you have that main character. And then you have a third you, and that is the narrator's voice. And I'm going to give you a little exercise here in a minute just to illustrate how this works. But the narrator is the voice that you tell the story in, okay? So it could be that your main character is, for example, 20 years old, but you want to tell this story from the perspective of your current 40-year-old self, okay? So you can do that. You, as the narrator, as the voice, you don't have to be the same age or have the same tone, or be in the same place of growth as the character is. And I know this is a little bit confusing, and that's why in a second when I give you a little exercise that you can do, I think it'll help unpack this a little bit. So is the narrator wise, ignorant, self-deprecating? What is the tone of voice of the narrator who's writing about the character? What is the age of the narrator? Is the narrator funny, serious, warm, distant? What is the space between the narrator and the character? So you could actually take a step back if you're writing about yourself at a much younger age, and have kind of a nostalgic tone. Or you could have a critical tone, like I can't believe I did that when I was 20, sort of thing. And so here's a prompt, this is in your notes, that I use to sort of help people wrap their mind around this narrator voice thing. I think the first two yous are pretty straightforward. You've got a character, and you need to flesh that character out and give that character a series of events to wade through, right? And then the you, of course, that's watching this video is just the body that you're walking around life in. But this narrator thing can be really tricky, and this little prompt that I've written, I think, is helpful. So take a look at your notes. It's the last page. So imagine that you are Red Riding Hood, and you're writing about your failed quest to take baked goods to Grandma's house. You're writing about the moment that you understand the grandma in the bed is really the wolf. You realize that not only has your grandmother been devoured, but you're also in mortal danger. Okay, so you're writing about that moment. The you that's writing is the you with your hands on the keyboard. The character you're writing about is 10 years old. That's Little Red Riding Hood, and she's about to have a terrible life lesson about trust and getting off track and following directions, or whatever the morals of the story are for Little Red Riding Hood. And if you want to try this, this is a lot of fun. You can write a paragraph from these 3 narrator voices. The first one, write about this moment as if you were an old lady in your 80s looking back at that little 10-year-old girl in that moment of realizing that Grandma was really the wolf who'd eaten Grandma, okay? Write in that voice. And then try the second one. Write in present tense as the 10-year-old, as if it were happening right now. I knock on the door. Nobody answers, so I open and peek in. Right from that 10-year-old perspective, so there's no distance whatsoever between the event and the narrator. The character and the narrator are essentially like that close, right? And then try this third voice. Now you're Red Riding Hood as a 30-something women's studies college professor, a feminist. And so you're writing about yourself as a 10-year-old, but now that you're teaching women's studies at a university and fully ensconced in the feminist mentality, you're writing about that moment with the wolf. So if you try those 3 different ways of writing about it, those 3 positions, you'll see that the narrator will tell different aspects to the story, even though all 3 of those narrators are writing about the same character. And I think that may help unpack it just a little bit. So anyway, again, thank you so much for your flexibility, and I'm really enjoying our class and wish that we had even more time together, because I always feel like 6 weeks, in your case 5, it's just not enough time to really get started in supporting you in the journey of writing all of the things that need to be said about your quest. But I'm hoping that little by little we can put some pieces together, and we may have a chance to continue working together afterwards. So we'll see what unfolds there. Anyway, have a great week, and I will see you next Wednesday.